Hello everyone, welcome to Wally Global. Today is October 20th, 2025. This is the first video this week. Today I have something really interesting to share with you. The slang cutting leaks means when powerful investors or insiders repeatedly exploit or deceive small investors, stocks are manipulated up and down, or getting trapped buying shares and so on. This time, however, the leak being cut is on a national level, and it's a sovereign wealth fund. Singapore's sovereign wealth fund, it seems, is quite upset about being cut. As a result, they're taking it to court. They're suing, who is it? A Chinese company, an electric vehicle company. What exactly happened to cause this leak cutting to reach a national level? So, if this is truly the case, what are the consequences for Chinese enterprises, concept stocks, and capital when raising funds overseas? Besides the high cost, what other consequences are there? Will they even be able to raise funds at all? No, right? Let's start to talk about this, and I'll tell you about this case, and we can analyze and discuss it. Let's talk.
Before we get started, please give this video a like and leave a comment below. Feel free to share this video with your friends too. If you're into this kind of content, make sure to subscribe to my channel and don't forget to hit the bell icon so you'll get notified whenever there's a new video. Thanks a lot.
Let's talk. As I mentioned at the beginning, you've all heard stories of individual investors getting exploited, but this time, it's not just ordinary investors. It's one of the world's most powerful sovereign wealth funds, the Singaporean government's investment company, GIC. According to Bloomberg has published articles for 2 consecutive days, specifically covering this case, on October 16th and on October 17th. Reuters also reported on it, but we're mainly quoting Bloomberg, which published 2 lengthy articles about this. I'll summarize it for you and explain what exactly happened. They, in fact, are referring to this Singaporean government investment company, or some call it a sovereign wealth fund. Not only do they suspect they've been exploited, but a US court has also formally accused NIO, the electric vehicle company, of inflating its revenue. So they're pursuing this to the very end. Why would a national level fund go so far as to file a lawsuit? How exactly were they exploited? Could this be a turning point for the crisis of confidence in the Chinese economy? Well, first, Bloomberg reports, according to the lawsuit, GIC has filed a complaint in the US District Court for the Southern District of New York. Wow, a national fund, a sovereign wealth fund, taking a lawsuit all the way to the US. The defendants include NIO itself, CEO William Leek, and former CFO Feng Wei. GIC's accusation is that they made false statements in the company's financial reports. This led to NIO's stock price being inflated, causing significant losses for investors. Hey, is that right? I'm really like this. Everyone thinks, even. I sometimes feel that China's regulation might be even stricter. Because China rejected those companies 3 times, they actually listed in Hong Kong upon application. You tell me, isn't it very interesting? Let's talk about and focus on this case. The core of the case centers on a NIO affiliate, the Wynang Battery Co. itself. It should be Wynang NIO Battery Asset Company. That's the full name. This company is responsible for NIO's battery as a service program. That is, users don't need to buy batteries all at once. They can use a monthly fee model to rent batteries and swap them. However, GIC, Singapore's sovereign wealth fund, accuses NIO of, through Wynang prematurely recognizing revenue. How is it done? Wynang would first pre-purchase from NIO large quantities of batteries. This allows NIO to immediately recognize these large purchases as sales revenue, or allocate it as sales revenue. Although in reality, users only pay monthly rental fees. Theoretically, revenue should be recognized gradually, not all at once. So, is this revenue inflation? Of course, it's a lawsuit. Actually, I've always said, I'm not talking about this company. They've already gone to court, the courthouse. Many mainland companies are like this, related party transactions. They use an impossible price or even fundamentally unfeasible deals, but through these methods, they can't really sustain it. But these methods, they manage to record revenue. In short, they use every trick in the book, both conceivable and inconceivable. And now this case, it turns out like this. We'll see if it's true. When the verdict comes out, I'll update you. Is it interesting? So you see, why do they do business at such a price? In fact, they can't really sustain it. We discussed before, it's basically investors actually sponsoring the consumers. It's actually investors sponsoring consumers. Consumers aren't buying, they're just taking. So how do investors make money? Through these transactions. But some things, if they go too far, too extreme, they will eventually explode. If Singapore's sovereign wealth fund keeps making money, would they sue? Of course there are some problems. It's not sustainable. All those bubbles that were blown up and messed around with will eventually burst. Let's get back to this case. This accusation first surfaced in 2022. There's a US short selling institution called Grizzly Research. They published a report exposing them. Wow, that's terrible then. They shorted you, then they made a report exposing everything about you, right? You are smart, you're finance people, but those research institutions are also very capable, right? The report pointed out that NIO used Wine and Company to engage in accounting manipulation, creating a false impression of profitability and high income. In reality, the financial situation and cash flow are far from what the financial reports show. This is how it's done. It reminds me of BYD. I'm not saying BYD has issues, but BYD also owes a lot of money and hasn't paid it back yet, right? Or its accounts payable, don't even mention owing money. Credit or suppliers are slow to pay. Some intuitives are saying the cycle needs to be shortened and actions need to be taken, leading to tight cash flow. So now, as I always say, after China real estate, electric vehicles are another area with many similar situations. For more in-depth analysis, I'll make another video. I've actually made many videos on this topic. Mainly, I'm citing media reports and some other reports. Back then, under pressure, NIO established an independent committee themselves to investigate. And in August 2022, the investigation concluded there was no improper conduct. They deemed Grizzly's report to be a false accusation. But this time, Singapore's Sovereign Wealth Fund, GIC, has gotten involved. This means they don't trust NIO's self-defense and are demanding judicial intervention. As soon as the news broke, NIO's stock price in Hong Kong, NIO's stock once plummeted by 13%. And its Singapore listing also immediately dropped by 10%. The market immediately suspected that their future fundraising ability would be hindered. If things go this way, a sovereign wealth fund, a national level entity from Singapore, is going after them. They believe there's something wrong. However, the next day, the stock price slightly rebounded, as I always say in Hong Kong. Have you noticed? Whenever there's a big event, Hong Kong stock prices initially open with a gap down. Then later in the day, it's as if someone is propping them up from behind the scenes. Of course, maybe everyone thinks it's cheap and has confidence to enter the market, right? It's always this pattern. Have you noticed? Some people say, oh, it's mainland capital. Some say it's the national team. Some say, oh, there's nothing at all, right? We have no way of verifying. You'd need a quantum computer to analyze all detailed transactions to find the truth. Maybe one day we'll find it. However, the next day, the stock price slightly rebounded. In Hong Kong, it rose by 6%, and in Singapore, it rose by 7%. Analysts say this rebound is merely a short-term technical bounce because the market has developed a crisis of confidence regarding NIO's future, financial transparency, and governance. This confidence has already been severely impacted. GIC is actually one of the most low-key yet influential globally. Singapore's sovereign wealth fund, it manages up to 936 billion, not Hong Kong dollars, but US dollars. They rarely go to court. According to Caixin's report, this is the first time a global sovereign wealth fund has sued a Chinese company, and specifically a Chinese company listed overseas. The lawsuit carries immense symbolic significance. Analysts point out GIC took action this time not only because they suffered losses, but damaged international reputation of Singapore's sovereign wealth fund. Oh, it's also dragging them down. Why is it dragging them down? Because they became leaks, which is very embarrassing. Not to mention, it affects their rating, making it unfavorable. But it's important to note that according to court documents from October 3rd, this type of case has been suspended by the judge. Content similar to class action lawsuit against NIO 2022. In other words, it's not that NIO is innocent, but possible the two cases merge trial. Wow, there's a class action lawsuit. So this national level Leek and class action lawsuit, are there other retail leaks? Or professional investors, retail investors? No, those aren't retail investors. Or a whole bunch of institutional investors, a whole bunch of professional investors. Everyone has been affected, right? Perhaps they'll have to pursue it further with everyone. So we'll look at both sides, not just listen to one side, right? So what did NIO say? Regarding this lawsuit, they said there's nothing new, and it stems from old allegations in a short-selling report from 2022. The company conducted an independent investigation that year, confirming nothing happened. They did it themselves. They emphasized the company's performance has been stable over the past 2 years. And the lawsuit does not represent the company's operations. However, some analysts say the problem is not just about legal liability, but about credibility. Hey, will NIO implicate other car companies? Will it implicate other EV companies? Will it even implicate other Chinese concept stocks, right? Over 90% of Hong Kong's listed companies are Chinese funded. Chinese concept stocks are IPOing in Hong Kong. Wow. Paul Chan said there are 200 companies coming to list. 200 companies, will they be higher quality than NIO? There's also another one. Union Bancaire Privé's senior consultant, Basen Ling, pointed out that the key question is whether NIO can immediately recognize revenue from selling batteries to its controlled entities under US accounting standards. Can it immediately recognize revenue? This is a crucial issue. If the court ultimately rules against NIO as non-compliant, the consequences will be quite severe. Well, actually, regarding these matters, have you ever heard of 0-kilometer used cars? 0-kilometer used cars are quite suspicious, I think. And are they even worth buying? Actually, besides this short-selling institution finding these things, are there many other detailed aspects, such as financing and so on? Of course, we don't know, right? If we don't know, we won't discuss it. But many people will wonder, right? NIO, since its establishment in 2014, has never recorded a full year of profit. Last month, they raised $1.2 billion through a new share issuance. Before that, they had repeatedly raised tens of billions through rights issues, bonds, and other methods. Raised tens of billions. Wow. Will people call it cutting leaks? I don't know. Everyone has their own opinion. And everyone sees things differently, right? In 2020, NIO even almost went bankrupt. It didn't go bankrupt. Ultimately, it was saved by the Hefei municipal government. With a 10 billion yuan investment, it barely managed to survive. Wow, now some mainland officials are also busy, like municipal governments, local governments, and local authorities. They also have to manage a lot of things, and they have to deal with a lot of things. They are truly capable. Then, in 2023, Abu Dhabi's sovereign wealth fund, called CYVN Holdings, invested $3 billion in NIO. I don't know how to pronounce that word because it's an Arabic word. CYVN Holdings acquired about 20.2% of the shares, becoming one of the largest external shareholders. Okay, let's go back to this case and talk about GIC itself, according to Bloomberg. Let's talk about GIC itself. Actually, this isn't the first time they've been burned by Chinese investments. Earlier, they invested in Luckin Coffee. Everyone knows Luckin Coffee is very famous, right? At that time, they were very optimistic about China's consumer tech stocks. However, Luckin Coffee later broke out with a scandal of financial fraud, and its stock price plummeted. Fortunately, GIC discovered it early and divested quickly, thus avoiding the biggest loss. This time, the NIO incident is seen as a repeat of the same mistake. It's really embarrassing. Currently, the Chinese EV market is extremely competitive. The competition is extremely fierce, describing companies like BYD, Li Auto, and Xpeng as operating in an extremely brutal and competitive market. Tesla is also fighting fiercely. NIO's future sales, in fact, are already lagging behind its main competitors. Plus, the price war hasn't stopped, especially with foreign companies, right? The company's fundamentals are not ideal. In fact, they're quite far from ideal, right? Analysts say that even if they launch new brands in Europe and Southeast Asia, achieving CEO William Lee's stated goal of doubling sales by the end of 2025, doubling sales by year end to turn losses into profits, this goal will be very difficult, even more difficult than for BYD. Also in Europe, besides selling in the UK, you'll have to compete with BYD there. And Europe is currently engaged in a trade war with China, which isn't easy, and it will only get tougher. They've already started imposing measures on aluminum and steel, already severely implemented. This time, GIC's investment in NIO for the future marks a long-term turning point after the bursting of China's new energy vehicle stock bubble. A symbolic moment. In the past, many said that foreign investors being cut like leeks was normal in the market. But this time, the target wasn't a retail investor or a regular foreign investor, but a state-level sovereign wealth fund, a sovereign-grade fund. GIC is one of the world's most elite investment teams. It has the most professional due diligence and the strictest compliance systems. Yet it still fell victim to the financial reports and structures of Chinese companies. This incident reflects the systemic collapse of trust in Chinese concept stocks. A systemic collapse of trust in Chinese concept stocks. Wow, this is a quote from Bloomberg. In the future, it won't just be GIC. Other international sovereign wealth funds, pension funds, and long-term funds may also re-examine the risk disclosures of Chinese companies. In short, if even sovereign wealth funds become state-level leaks, then the cost for Chinese companies to raise capital overseas will become increasingly high. Of course, some people might say, oh, it's a collapse. No one will invest in China anymore. No, I don't believe that. Chinese stocks, as long as they are cheap enough, good value, and offer high enough returns in any situation, will still attract investors. Foreign capital will still come in. But who are those investors? Their required returns will be different. So people will still invest, but the returns they demand will be higher. What does that mean? Previously, there might have been long-term funds, pension funds, and many other international sovereign wealth funds. Gradually, if things continue this way, it will become a playground for hedge funds to play. There will be hot money. Some will see it as an adventure park, and some will even specialize in high-risk plays. Some will treat it as an international financial casino. Will Hong Kong be the same? Hong Kong has so many Chinese companies. What's the situation like? Recently, even Hong Kong companies are going to the US to get into trouble, right? That's also very worrying. But everyone remembers, I just reported it. All right, that's all for this time. What do you all think? Feel free to leave a comment.
That's all for today's video. If you enjoyed it, please give it a like, leave a comment, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.